Heard on Thursdays with Nikki is about to go live online. Catch HOT, the iconic radio show that made Philippine FM radio talk, every Thursday on the Monster.
Streaming video on the Monster Facebook page at RX931, the Monster YouTube channel at RX931, and twitch.tv/Monster RX931.
You heard on Thursdays host, Nikki Porter. Stand by and enjoy the program.
Hey Monsters, good evening and welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk. That's heard on Thursdays on The Monster. I'm your host this evening, Nikki Porter. If athletes can get coaches to help them unlock the champion within, so can regular folk like us. Sometimes all we need is that push in the right direction, that supportive and non-judgmental voice to tell us which way to go so we can be the best versions of ourselves. Tonight, we have the pleasure of bringing back to the show Kathi Rañeses. She is a certified executive and emotional intelligence coach, speaker, and founder of Coaching Happiness, which is a coaching service whose mission is to create a better world, one Filipino at a time, as well as a founder of Coach Well Leadership and Training, an executive coaching service whose mission is to cultivate kinder communities through a culture of coaching. She's committed to helping people and organizations see their possibilities and guide them into their highest potential. And you can also listen to her podcast, straightforwardly titled the Coaching Happiness Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast fix. So without further ado, heard on Thursdays, let's welcome to the show, Kathi Rañeses. Hi.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me on your show again. Always a pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice to speak to you again after a couple years, actually. So happy to see you back on the show. I do want to ask the very first question, of course, like you are known as the happiness coach, apart from you being an emotional intelligence coach, as well as a certified executive coach. I know you as a happiness coach, right? So yeah. What do you think then? Since I feel like happiness, it's a very, we know that we understand in some way what happiness is, but what are the biggest factors that can affect one's capacity to experience happiness?
Right. Well, actually, I actually challenge that a lot of like, do we really know what happiness is? Because a lot of us have kind of been conditioned to think that we will be happy when we achieve certain things, or we will be happy, when we get approval from other people, etc. When actually, from my experience, a couple of factors affect happiness. Right. Number one is our social relationships. It's really the quality of our relationships. Do the people that we surround ourselves with, like, are they positive and optimistic, or are they what I like to call negastars?
Yeah, I remember that term.
Right, like so like if you have like 10 good things to share about your life, they can think of like 15 to like drag you down. And also the satisfaction, like, like what do you get out of these relationships? Like, do they challenge you to want to do something better with your life? Do they challenge you to grow? Do you look at the people in your life and say, you know what, I really want to be like this person, or you know what, like I really look up to this person and I don't want to let them down. So that's number one, right? Number two is your level of emotional intelligence, and I'm guessing we're probably going to get into that a little bit later, but it really is, honestly, it's something that a lot of people struggle with, being able to identify, manage, and really feel through emotions, because a lot of us have been taught to tamper down a lot of emotions that we feel are too negative. So it's also being able to have that, right? When we say that that we're happy, it doesn't mean that we're happy 24/7, right? It just means that we can go through the range of human emotions and know that we are resilient enough to go back to a level of happiness. And for me, a good gauge of that is seeing how grateful people are. Like, what kind of gratitude practice do you have, right?
Mm,
Can you look at the world, and see things that you are grateful for, or things in your life that you are grateful for, or are you always like complaining about something, right?
right.
Are you always the victim of your own story? And then the last one, I think number three, is also having a level of personal awareness. It's really how you view the world. A lot of people have been taught to have a very pessimistic lens, right? Like,
Right.
things are never going well for me. Whatever I do, I'm never going to make people happy, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a very like fixed mindset. And that's
Mm.
how our negastars are developed, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there is such a thing as learned optimism, wherein we can actually kind of um, train or retrain our brain to start looking for the good things in life and focusing on that. So whenever
Mm.
we hear something negative or something negative comes up, we don't focus on that as much as we focus on the good things, knowing that this is only going to be here for time being, for a season, but at the end of the day, I can kind of go back to a place of happiness. So it's really that
Mm.
level of personal awareness of knowing what you have control of as well in your environment, and focusing on that instead of bemoaning the things that maybe aren't going your way because you have zero control over it.
Right. And so I love that you broke it down pretty much and like what what can affect, your capacity to feel happiness or to experience it. So once again,
Mm.
monsters, it is your relationships with the people around you, your emotional intelligence, and also your personal awareness. So we are going to dive a little bit into those in just a little bit. But for those who probably are still unfamiliar, because right, we like some of us maybe are hesitant to linger in that feeling of happiness for whatever reason,
Mm.
um or don't even know how to describe it. So as someone who has studied on, positive psychology, is it, and it's just like to have that understanding, to be in a state of happiness, what does that mean?
Oh, I think that happiness has a lot of different meanings to different people.
Hmm.
For me personally, I like to say that happiness is having a regulated nervous system. And it's
Oh my gosh, that's it.
it, and it's
Yeah.
it's probably not the answer that people were expecting, but
Hmm.
like, for me, and I've, aside from the whole coaching during the pandemic, I also went into like acupuncture, which is basically it's basically med school with Mandarin. And we talk about like chronic inflammation and what emotions are connected to like all these diseases that we get,
Right.
and really learning about like how our emotions affect our physical body. Like, for example, like, we know that stress can cause chronic inflammation, which is why
Yes.
if you are always stressed out, you get like gut issues, you get
Mhm.
skin issues, etc. But when you are in a calm and happy state, those miraculously go away, and it's because you have learned to regulate your dysregulated nervous system, that now
Mm.
your body has time to calm down and focus on the other things it's supposed to do to like keep you alive.
Yeah.
So after learning that for me was a huge aha moment, that to be in a state of happiness really means that I have a regulated enough nervous system, that these
Mhm.
feelings of depression, these feelings of anxiety, these feelings of fear aren't taking over me physically, that I can
Mm.
relax.
That is actually such a very interesting take, right, on how we would know we're in a state of happiness. And for many, probably not aware what, what a regulated nervous system feels or looks like, or what that entails too. So why don't we, I feel like people are more familiar with what a dysregulated nervous system is. So
100%. Yeah.
so could you describe that for them, so just so that they know they're probably in that state right
Yeah. No, exactly. So when we talk about the nervous systems and whether you're regulated, dysregulated, it really comes down to our sympathetic nervous system. So this is your freeze, flight,
now.
fawning, reaction to when you are experiencing stress or trauma. Usually in the body, this could show up as, are you constantly constipated? That's actually a huge kind of like telltale that, okay, do you suffer from anxiety or panic attacks, or do you have a nervous kind of personality? Right. When you can regulate your nervous system, this is where you can allow the other part of your central nervous system, your parasympathetic, or your the rest and digest part, to really come in and just do their job of helping you to relax, giving you, a better quality sleep, and all that, in order to really help you to ground, to focus, get rid of whatever brain fog is happening because of a dysregulated nervous system. And at the same time, also giving you that grace in the space to create the routines that you need to do in order to, bring you back to a better, more positive state of being. So that could be, I got enough sleep last night, so now I can wake up early and I can go out and take my dog for a walk, right? And I can get that sunshine, I can get that vitamin D, or I can focus on work, and I don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time just staring at my email because I don't know what to reply because the brain fog is taken over. So it's really that. It's really noticing what's coming up for you, and then trying to figure out what is the root cause of this. And then trying to figure out, okay, and how is this getting in the way of me being a better person, a happier person, and then really addressing that. Yeah.
I want to know, because you mentioned to let the parasympathetic system help you regulate or ground yourself. So that's rest and digest, basically the two systems in the body that that it's responsible for. But how does breathing come into play to ground your dysregulated self?
Right. Well, so breath work really helps to, depending on the breath work, it helps to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. So there's a breathing technique that I like to use. It's called 4-7-8. So you inhale for 4 counts, you hold for 7 counts, and then you exhale for 8 counts. So doing a couple of cycles of that triggers your parasympathetic nervous system. You're basically telling your body that, okay, I'm ready for bed. I'm ready to relax already. And it just helps it just get to work.
I never realized that it was like a precursor for the parasympathetic system to come into play, because it's just like you just know it as okay, it helps you sleep, right? The 4-7-8, that's how I came to know about it. But then to know that that is what you need in order for you to have restful sleep, that just blew my mind tonight. So I hope anybody who's listening tonight, if you guys have trouble sleeping after this show, 4-7-8.
Exactly.
All right. And so we're still on the topic of happiness here. And there are a lot of words that we can interchange with the word happiness, but I'm not sure if we're getting the context correctly. So for you, Kathi, is there a difference between joy and happiness?
Good question. So for me, joy is more or less an inner feeling. So it's that inner feeling of well-being and satisfaction. while happiness is more of an outward expression of the pleasure and comfort you're kind of getting.
I see.
So for example, joy could be seeking meaning and purpose in your life, while happiness is seeking the pleasure and comfort, right? So let's say materialistic things, right? Like having a comfortable bed to sleep in or having a nice car. You can give happiness to a person, but let's say spirituality can give us joy, or happiness is that state of being happy, but joy is that satisfaction of getting that happiness, if that makes sense.
Okay. And then what about the difference between happiness and positivity?
Right. I think that one is pretty simple because happiness is a mood. It's something that we experience, while positivity is a mindset.
Okay. All right. Positivity is a mindset. And I feel like the reason why I wanted to ask this, by the way, is because like positivity, I feel like people have already tied that to the concept of toxic positivity, that you have to constantly be positive. And so the lines might be blurred between happiness and positivity, probably in that sense. So for the monsters who are listening, there's a difference between the two.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so while we're on the topic of like toxic positivity, really quickly, how can we check ourselves, by the way, before we encroach on that boundary of positivity and it being toxic already towards people who are having a bad day or something, for example?
Right. This is super common, and we tend to do this a lot when we don't even realize that we're doing it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it's really important that, again, we go back to self-awareness, right? Being able to check ourselves and asking ourselves, like, are we really ready to hold space for this person that might be going through something, or is our comfort greater than what this person is going through? Which is why we're just going to throw a statement out there that just sounds really positive. So we can just say that, oh, we did something, right? We told them that, oh, kaya mo naman yan eh, or hindi, magaling ka naman, like, you can do it. And then
Yeah.
just give ourselves a pat on the back saying, oh, we did something. When in actuality, what it was we didn't feel comfortable to sit with this person and really ask, those questions that will help them to introspect or allow them to vent. So we just kind of plastered a toxic positive statement to kind of help us move the conversation along or to change the subject.
Yeah. So now with the lines that we usually throw that actually are toxic positivity. Is that a word? Okay, anyway. Yeah, you get what I mean, monsters.
Yeah.
And Kathy also. So with the lines that we throw, I think this is also where emotional intelligence comes into play, right? To understand, like, do they need reassurance right now in terms of words, or do they need to sit on a particular feeling or evaluate?
Exactly. Or like, do I have space to be able to hold space for this person, or do I matter more? And that's
Ah,
often the ugly thing that we don't want to look at, to be
yeah,
honest and say, you know what, like, I don't have the time to hold space for you today, or I don't want to. It's an uncomfortable subject for me. So
yeah.
let me just say something, put the band-aid on it, and then let's move
Mm-hmm.
on to the next conversation.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yes. Many of us are guilty of this for
We're
sure.
all we're all guilty of it because we were never
Yeah.
really taught, right? Like,
That's
we were
fair.
never
Yeah.
really taught how to hold space for difficult emotions for
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, let alone for other people.
Right. Right. I can definitely share, like, I've had moments where it's like, they're having a bad day, but it's like you want to rush this along because you have other things to do. So you just try and say something to make them feel a little bit better. Oh my
Exactly.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Check yourselves, monsters. All right. Okay. So, do you feel like the last time I had you on the show, it was like maybe tail end of the pandemic.
Mm,
So, do you think through your profession that many people have experienced a mindset shift on their lives, especially when it comes to the pursuit of happiness, especially
mm,
with everything that happened during the pandemic, the
yeah.
restrictions, the lockdown, etc.?
Mm. I think there's definitely a lot more awareness now about
Mm.
mental health because of the pandemic. I remember like back like 2019, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were still kind of laughing, challenging the notion of what is mental health, and
Right.
that like it was like a rich people problem. And then the pandemic happened and everybody realized, oh no, like it is a real issue. Now like I noticed that a lot of people are a lot more mindful now of kind of like what they're feeling and what they're going through, because they had no choice during the pandemic but like to sit with their feelings and
Right.
maybe to sit with people who, otherwise they would kind of just see in the mornings when they had to head out the door, and at night before they kind of they had to
That's right.
come back home, have dinner, and then that was kind of it. But then having to sit with these people in your lives and realizing that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize like this was the person that that I spend my life with, or I didn't
Mhm.
realize that like this is what my kid is interested in.
Right.
It really cracked open that people wanting to kind of like be a lot more present in their lives, which for me is really that cornerstone of building happiness, because with presence you can now start to notice things that you can now be grateful for, which
Mm.
then can build on to happiness and resilience as they move forward.
Yeah. And the pandemic, of course, also did challenge many of us who were stuck at home with, let's say, family members who, you don't really like spending a lot of time with. However, because of
Yeah.
the pandemic, you just had to. You had no choice. So,
Yeah.
what can we do? I guess now, I mean, even if like we've eased away from the pandemic now, what can
Mm,
we do to set that boundary, knowing it's like this person is not good for my mental health, does not make me
right.
feel good whenever they're around? How can I still try and maintain that relationship but from a distance?
Mm. No, I definitely think that people appreciated the idea of having boundaries during the
Mm,
pandemic. I just feel that maybe it just wasn't executed quite as how it should be in terms of communicating the boundary again. And
mm,
we go back to emotional intelligence, simply because we don't know how to identify what emotions it is that we were feeling, and we didn't know how to communicate it in a way
right.
that would lead to a healthy conversation. Like there is a lot of especially with us Filipinos, like we were really taught that we should always be happy. Like
Yeah.
happiness was the only emotion that is allowed. If you said that you were sad or you were struggling, etc., then you were, like the term is like ingrata ka, right? Like
Mm,
you shouldn't be feeling these feelings because like you have a roof over your head, you eat 3 meals a day, etc.
that's
So
right.
we've
Yeah.
come to a point where now we don't know what actual authentic happiness looks like, because we have
True.
been pretending for so long. um,
Ooh.
and how boundaries comes in is that we still pretend with all these people at home. So now that we are feeling these feelings of resentment, irritation, frustration, we don't know how to express that because we were
Yeah.
never taught. How do we express these other emotions that aren't connected to happiness?
Yeah.
So in terms of even us as Filipinos, we aren't even at emotional intelligence yet. We're still at emotional literacy. We're still
Yeah.
we're still trying to find the words to describe what it is we're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, oh, you know what, I'm feeling really irritated right now. Like we don't have the word for that. We just go straight to anger. I'm feeling really angry right now. But that's not, the feeling and the word that you associate with it, like, doesn't make sense, which is why for a lot of us, you've probably experienced, people as well who are just like super, super quiet. They tamp everything down. And then, one day they just blow up. Right. Or it's like something happens, a really tiny, tiny incident gets blown up into this huge mess.
True.
And then like 5 years worth of feelings kind of come out and we don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I first of all, I like that you mentioned like many of us have been pretending to be happy. Oh my gosh. I was impacted by that. It was just like, because, it's just like we were taught not to, to kind of just like shove the negative feelings down and just like keep a smile on your face, be quote unquote grateful for what you have. But then I feel like in this sense, grateful is kind of like weaponized in such a way that abandons yourself and how you really feel.
Exactly.
So for those who like, if you mentioned emotional literacy, I feel like there's also a lot of people who would intellectualize or would therapize how they feel, but they don't actually feel it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
pretty. And in coaching, we say that the longest journey most people take is around 18 inches, and that's from the head going down to the heart. Like a lot of, like we know what needs to get done or what needs to be said, but we don't know how to really feel through it. Because again, like we've been taught that no, this is how it's supposed to be, and I just need whatever feeling is there. Like I don't know how to deal with that, so I'm just going to tamp that down. And the thing is with pushing down and depressing feelings, is it comes out in other ways. So
true.
It comes out in other ways. So I do the work and I see people, let's say with, like shoulder pain, back pain, etc. And when I go through the coaching process and we do the interviews, a lot of their issues are from literally carrying family members, like being the breadwinner of the family and not being able to express healthy anger because of feelings of guilt and shame, and because they don't know, bawal magalit, and it's just something that they were burdened with. And then they come to me and it's showing up as spinal problems, as back pain, as shoulder pain.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So it's really interesting as well, seeing how our emotions really affect our mental health and also affect us physically.
For sure. Yeah. And so we should probably dive down now into emotional intelligence, since the conversation is turning that way. And because the last time we spoke, which was at the tail end of 2022, I only knew you as like the happiness coach. But now it's like you're billed as an executive and emotional intelligence coach. So I want to focus, of course, on the latter half. So what made you decide then to focus or study about emotional intelligence?
You know what? I was always an emotional intelligence coach, the man. I didn't put it out there because again, like people didn't understand what that meant. So there was still like a bit of education that needed to be done in order for, when you say emotional intelligence, like, okay, I get it. Right. So for me, the reason why I also named my practice Coaching Happiness is because that was the easiest way to get people to understand it's all about emotions. But it was always about emotional intelligence. And for me, like my mission really was to get people, especially Filipinos, to experience authentic happiness.
Right.
Because again, like we were raised, to be happy all the time, and we were never given the tools to, to navigate the world when difficult emotions came up. And like for me, so like just a little bit of background about me as well. Like I was born and raised in Dubai, and I came here for high school, and it was a bit of a culture shock. coming from like an English education, hanging around with Brits for the most part who were very emotionally intelligent, and then coming here and just seeing how people would navigate relationships. I think one of my favorite examples is when I was in high school. I would see, like, okay, like there's the whole legal session, and then they become girlfriend, boyfriend. And then let's say, like, like they're at the party, they're together. Maybe the boyfriend says something that the girlfriend doesn't like. So the rest of the night, it's like deadma, right? Like he's getting the cold shoulder. And the guy might be like, oh, what's happening? Like, are you okay? Did I do something? Like, what's going on? Etc. And the girl would most likely be like, no, it's fine, whatever. Like she would not say anything. And exactly, right? And then the poor guy who is trying to manage now his girlfriend's emotions because he can't identify what he did. Then comes the suyo, right? Like, sige na, anong gusto mo, or tara, let's eat out or whatever, para mawala na yan, right? And the tampo suyo cycle, as I like to call it, for me was fascinating because for me, I was like, this could have ended with her just saying, I didn't like what you said, right? And the guy could have just said, oh, I'm sorry, and then they could have moved on with their life. But this whole thing still needs to happen, and being passive aggressive is now the result of getting used to the whole tampo suyo cycle. So even up until we graduate college, we're in the workplace, etc., when we have a colleague who may have did or said something that we don't agree with, we're super passive aggressive, and everybody in the office will know about it because I will tell them, except for the person that I have an issue with.
True.
Right?
Oh my gosh.
And then we have this whole like makuha ka sa pakiramdam, which for me was crazy. Like, how am I supposed to intuit what it is that you are feeling based on your passive aggression? So it was really that for me was the root of why I said, you know what, I really want to delve into this whole emotional intelligence thing, because there is something missing, right? And like, we are people who are so emotionally connected, but at the same time, we don't know how to express these feelings. But if you look into the Tagalog language, at least for me, Tagalog, because that's what I'm used to, like, there's a whole plethora. We have such deep, beautiful words. I mean, even just the expression of anger, right? There is like irita all the way down to like puot. Like, it's that deep, right? But we don't use it, and it frustrates me so much.
and it's so it's great that you mentioned that. Yes, we are very passionate. I feel like we are passionate people, but then to put those into words, to communicate that with other people, is just a completely different ball game, because once again, we were early taught. And so for you, labeling now or adding now, emotional intelligence coach, kind of like framing yourself in that way, do you feel like it's time, like putting it at the front of your business, of your coaching business, that what, let's use emotional intelligence now?
Yes, for sure. No, so I have been, like, my advocacy really now is getting emotional literacy out, and really just getting ourselves to understand as well, like, where this has come from, right? Like, what is the root of this? And a lot of it was really growing up and not being taught. Like, it's funny, like, like, for example, if you go to a park, right, and you see, let's say, like a foreign family, like a white family out, and they have their little toddler falls down, and they're usually like, you'll usually see them like, oh, are you okay? Are you hurt? Like, where does it hurt? Like, point to where it's hurting. Right. And at a young age, you see the child like, oh, it hurts here, but I'm okay. Right. Or it hurts here. I have a rash, but I'm okay. right? They, at a young age, they already know how to communicate. And then, on the other side, and I grew up as this, so, you know, like I would, like you'd see the Filipino family, right? Little toddler running around, toddler falls down,
Mm.
and you usually see like the mom or the yaya or the tita go, oh, nahulog, oh, bad floor. Like, we blame the floor for why the toddler fell down, right? So
Mm.
at a young age, we're already teaching, like, you don't have to own, you don't have to take responsibility for whatever it is you're feeling. It's not your fault. It's the floor's fault, right?
Oh,
Or,
wow.
the toddler starts crying because they have an emotion that they do want to express, but because,
Mhm.
they don't know how to say it and you're too busy blaming the floor, now they start crying, right? And usually the next thing that we do is, we try to threaten them with something. We say, oh, tama na, stop crying na. Sige ka,
Mhm.
kunin ka ni Kuya Guard. Right? So imagine,
Ay,
imagine this is
nako.
the culture that we grow up with, right? Of, instead
Right.
of identifying, owning our emotions, saying, oh, this hurt me, I didn't like what you said, that hurt my feelings. It's always, oh, we put the blame on somebody else, or we're kind of, there's the fear factor that goes into it. So, okay, we just need to keep quiet, right? And we
Mm.
just need to
Yeah.
keep depressing the feeling,
Yeah.
or, like doing something else, everything else aside from addressing the issue. And then when the
Right.
issue does come along, we will dramatize it to no end because, again, growing up, we've been taught to always be the victim.
Yes.
So,
Oh my gosh.
right. So
That's
it
true.
becomes hard to have these conversations of, hey, you know what? Like, I realize that I hurt you and I take accountability for that and I'm sorry. Right. That most conversations could have been that. But no, we choose we choose the route of being passive aggressive. We choose the route of telling everybody else. So somehow this information would trickle down to the person involved, and
Right.
makukuha sila sa pakiramdam. But there was no actual, like, sitting down, talking to the person, no apology. There's no, taking accountability. It's also the whole, oh, dapat alam mo na yan, right? And
Mm.
this is super common within families as well. So, during the pandemic, there was a lot of that going around. Like, alam mo naman na, ano, diba? Dapat okay na tayo. Alam mo na yan. Right?
Yes.
Or,
Oh my gosh. I've heard of that so many times. It's so true. Crazy.
right?
Oh.
So there is no, like, we haven't really learned, like, what does it mean to take accountability? You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
And like, and how has this simple, let's just stick with accountability. How does this simple act of taking accountability or not taking it, how has this affected the quality of our life and the quality of our happiness?
Mm. Right. And it's so hard, no? Like I've been in that spot to be like, that this person did you wrong, but now that I'm a little bit more self-aware, it's like, okay, how could I have contributed to this
Mm,
situation too? It's so hard to turn it back on you because it's just like, but I didn't do anything wrong. But did you really do nothing wrong? It's like, to take that, to take stock of really what you did,
yeah,
that really has to, you have to push your ego aside, which is
right.
hard
Yeah,
for a lot of
yeah.
people.
and
Yeah.
and having like these conversations as well, and I deal with this naman, like, on the executive coaching side. I deal with this a lot with, with teams. It's like, I'm working with this other person, we don't get along, but I'm not going to tell my manager. Like, I am just going to, I'm going to work with everybody else and ostracize this other person, and then,
Yeah.
it's going to turn into a whole drama fest when it could have just been, hey, you know what, like, we don't really work well together. What about we just talk to our manager and try to figure out another solution?
Mm.
Could have been that, right? Or it
Yeah.
could have been, hey, I just wanted to clear, like, before we start working on this project, that, like, this is what I've kind of been feeling for the past couple of months, etc.
Yeah.
Are you
Mhm.
open to talk about it so we can move
Yes.
forward?
Yeah. I mean, to have that kind of workplace, or to have even just individuals be open to the prospect of conflict resolution without it ending up in a, without raising your voices or something, really just having a
Mm,
discussion about it. That I think is, I feel like a lot of people catastrophize, right? The concept of like talking about it to the other person,
yeah,
whether you're in a workplace, in your family, in a relationship. So that's why the passive
yeah.
aggression happens.
Exactly. I mean, not just that, even like for example, like dealing with clients, right? Like if a client sends you an
Fair,
email
yeah.
to like, and they say something like, "Oh, I really wasn't happy with, with where this project is going, et cetera, et cetera." The person would not reply. Like they
Hmm.
would wait for it to escalate to get to another manager because they were just afraid of they were afraid and they didn't know how to reply
Yeah.
to something that they deemed was very negative. So when in fact all it was feedback.
Yeah.
All it was is neutral information of just telling this of your clients telling you, hey, you know what, like based on my feedback for this was I really wasn't happy. And instead of, let's say, the client, the person going, oh, could you please tell me a little bit more so I can have
Mm.
a better understanding, right? Like they would put it off till the very last minute until your client is already at the point where they're irate and ready to leave you.
Mm-mm.
And and then like maybe your manager now needs to step in to try to pacify the situation. And
True.
again, it could have been sorted out with a very simple mindset change of, this isn't a personal attack on me. this
Yes.
isn't this isn't really negative. It's just neutral information. And I should be in charge of this conversation. I could lead it where it needs to go. But again, because we were never taught this,
Mm-hmm.
and because we were mirrored, we got from our parents how they dealt with this as well, which also
Exactly.
wasn't that good. We don't have the tools for it. So it's really teaching people that there are tools available. There you can reframe, instead of holding on to that belief system that you have about certain situations, you can reframe it and have it work to your advantage.
Mm.
For me, really is a lot of what my work is about.
So now, how can we make space in our lives with the people around us, um, to increase that emotional intelligence? And I'm sure, I mean, of course, I know you have like, programs or workshops about this too, but are there certain steps that you have to go through? Because, you can't just do it overnight, right? Because
Yeah.
like this is something that you grew up with. This is really innate behavior of yours already. So how do you,
Yeah.
as you say, like reframe the way that you see certain situations that are, uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and make room for like to increase like your emotional intelligence in those situations?
Right. Well, I think number one is taking a temperature check, right? Asking the people around you for honest feedback about, let's say, ask yourself, why am I always angry? Like, what is happening with that? Like,
Mm,
I'm not happy being angry, but this seems to be my default now, right? So get a temperature check, ask around, introspect, like
yeah.
where do I think this is coming from, right? And then just try to find the pattern.
Right.
Number two is like, being able to have that level of awareness where during the time that it is happening to you, you could take a step back and just try to go, wait lang, like what is happening and what emotion is there,
Mm,
right? So let's say I'm just feeling really, am I angry ba or am I frustrated or am I just irritated?
yeah.
Right? So if I'm just
Hmm.
feeling irritated, why is the level of anger that is coming out of me volcanic? Right? Like what else is there? So being able to really ask yourself those questions in the moment is important. No, number three for me is also trying to find that root cause. Okay, why am I always angry? And for
Sure.
me, what is the lesson? Because we tend to label this emotion as either positive or negative. right?
Yeah.
When
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, emotions are emotions. What they
Mm-hmm.
are is that this is your body's innate system of telling you that there is something in your environment that you should be wary of. That's
Mm-hmm.
all it is, right? So when you feel anger, what's usually happening is somebody has crossed your boundary. They have crossed your personal boundary and you are not happy with it. Your body is telling you, hey, this person is crossing your boundary. You need to say something so they don't
Yeah.
do it again. That's all it is, right?
I
So
think it's important to like just highlight that moment when you said that emotions are neither positive nor negative, right? Because it's like we grew up learning like, feeling angry is bad, feeling sad is bad, feeling crying is bad. So like all those things. And so important for even as adults for us to remember that, it's just information from your body that's telling you that you're experiencing something uncomfortable. And yeah, and it's important for you to pause and kind of really think about that. So yeah,
yeah.
what else would you like to say about
No,
that?
really, and just asking yourself, like, what's the life lesson? Like personally, I believe that like life is cyclic. When we
Hmm.
don't learn the lesson the first time, like let's say with relationships, like we pick a toxic partner, and
Hmm.
we didn't learn the lesson the first time. If they're gonna come back,
In a
different
different phase,
person,
yes.
different face, different issue, but
Hmm.
same root cause.
Hmm.
So for me, like that's where our emotions really come in. It's really telling you, why am I always angry with people in my relationships? Oh, it's me. At the end of the day, it's me. I allow these people in,
Hmm.
right? And
Yes.
then being able to, when you learn the lesson, being able to manage it. Now, what do I want to do? Now that I have all this information, I know where it's coming from. I know the life lesson, like I understand now why it is. Now, what do I need to do? So maybe this is a lesson for me to have better boundaries. So, we
Mm.
teach people how we want to be treated. And when I tell people that, yes, you are more than welcome in my space, pero hanggang dito lang, because this is my personal boundary.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that, right? Being able to do that and implement that now allows you to just feel through the rest of the emotion and let it go, because you know that I did something.
Hmm.
I established that boundary, or I talked to this person, and I don't need this anymore.
Hmm.
My saying when it comes to emotions is okay lang bumisita pero bawal mamahay, right? You don't
Yeah,
want to you don't want to have that emotion be your entire mood, like you're the entire character.
that's
You don't
right.
want to be known as the angry person in the office,
Hmm.
right? So yeah, so it's really that. And once you learn to catch yourself faster, identify your emotions faster, learn the lesson and be able to manage and let it go, the easier and the lighter your life becomes.
Mm. I love this talk on emotional intelligence. But I feel like just to clarify, do we have to know first about emotional literacy before diving into emotional intelligence?
No naman. So the reason why
Okay.
I call this emotional literacy is because with emotional intelligence, you need to be able to, number one, identify, right? And number two, manage before
Mhm.
number three, you can release the emotions. When I say like we are still at emotional literacy, it's because we're still at a point where a lot of us don't know how to identify the emotions that we're going through. Because
Mhm.
again, simply we were never taught. It was never taught. We were always taught to be happy, put a smile on your face.
Mhm.
So when these emotions come up, we don't know what they are. So if you notice during, a couple of years back, during the mental health crisis, when, words of like depression, anxiety, like these words were being thrown out of, oh, this is what it is. All of a sudden, everybody was depressed and everybody
Mm.
had anxiety. And I
Mhm.
would get these clients and I'd ask them, okay, that's interesting. So were you diagnosed? And they were like, no, like feeling ko lang meron ako kasi it's been a rough year. I've been feeling sad, etc. People didn't realize depression and anxiety. They like, these are mental disorders that usually you need a therapist. in order to diagnose you with, let's say, depression. And what level of depression are you? What is it? Clinical depression? For anxiety, there are different kinds. Is it general? Is it social, etc.? But because these were the words that we were hearing a lot at the time, and people again didn't know how to identify what they were feeling, they went straight to depression, and I have depression and I have anxiety, when they were simply feeling sad, they were feeling lonely, they were nervous about the future, or they were fearful about the future. And for them, because I don't have the vocabulary for that, and I don't know what I'm feeling in my body, I'm just going to go with anxiety and depression.
Yeah. Well, hopefully now, like there's been an uptick, right, and an interest in mental health. Like there's been a shift in mindsets in some people, especially with what we went through in the pandemic. People are turning their heads now towards how can I, regulate myself now. A lot of these words are, and there's a lot of content online also that shares that kind of information. Hopefully, for the monsters listening, they are reputable sources as well when they
Oh,
follow
for
and
sure.
consume
Please,
the
yeah,
content.
please do your research, because there are also a lot of people who just want to share whatever they feel makes sense to them with no real backup. For me,
Mhm.
if I could just give suggestions, I don't know
Yeah,
them,
of
but I
course.
love their
Yes.
content. You guys could look for Siko Diwa on
Mm,
Instagram. He is
yeah.
a Filipino psychologist, and he talks a lot about in terms of our culture and how that affects our psychology. Like pakikisama and how that affects it.
Hmm.
And there's also, I think, the Brown Psych on Instagram. And she's a psychologist that is, I think, based in the US. And she
Hmm.
also talks about a lot about our culture, the issue of hiya, and how that affects us mentally, and how we can kind of work around that to move forward with our life as well. So there are some amazing resources out there, but yeah, please do your research.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, okay, so we have talked about happiness, and that entails awareness, your relationships, and also in your self-awareness. Wait, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and your relationships. Yes. Now,
Mm.
how can all these three things also contribute to our pursuit of our highest potential? Before actually answering that, that term also gets thrown around a lot. It mixes in with, I don't know if it's the same thing, like your highest timeline, your highest
Mm.
frequency, your highest self. Do they
Right.
all mean the same thing?
I'll be honest, I'm not sure. But
Okay,
I'm,
okay.
I'm I'm really not sure, because it really, there are different labels. Some give it a more spiritual label, some give it
Yeah.
practical label. But for me, when you say highest potential, for me, this means that I am living a life that is true to me.
Mm,
Because I think a lot of people also, when they hear highest potential, it's always about achieving, getting to next level. And
yes.
I'll be honest, that is tiring. That
Yes,
is
it is.
tiring, and it's not sustainable.
Mhm.
So when I hear highest potential, for me, this is me living a life that is aligned with myself and my values, and this is me living authentically. So,
Mm,
for a lot of people, reaching their highest potential might mean a certain amount in the bank, right? Or driving a certain car, or living in a certain area, in a certain, etc. But for example, for me, my idea of highest potential is being able to wake up anytime I want.
mm,
Being, having my fridge stocked with, nutritious food,
mhm.
making time for, my pets and my plants, etc., while still being able to provide a service to people that I feel can impact their lives in a big way.
Yeah.
So, in order to really, I guess, be guided to your highest potential, it really starts with, number one, your personal awareness. Like, what is it that you want to work on in terms of yourself? What
Mm,
honestly makes you happy? right? Instead of looking at other people, telling you what you should be aiming for, just ask yourself, what makes me happy genuinely, right?
Yeah.
And then having those social relationships around you that you feel can help support that. So it might mean looking for other groups, right? It might mean having to plug yourself in with and new people in order to help raise your awareness, in order for you to network, in order for you to be of value, and also to be able to hold space for other people. And then again, a level of emotional intelligence. So this is also where you have the awareness to ask yourself, is this really what I want, or am I just
Mhm.
people pleasing? Right? Is this really
Yeah.
what I want, or is this something that my mom, my dad, my family
Mhm.
member wants for me? And if this isn't true to myself, if this isn't aligned with what I really want to do, then what is it that I really want to do?
Yeah. And
Using
okay,
that to guide you. Yeah.
yeah. And so for many of us, it's like, okay, highest potential, how do I get there? How do I even know what my potential is in the first place?
Right.
Like how do we discern that? We might have
Mhm.
many interests, we might be doing something different already. But how do we really, be in touch with our body, our feelings, and knowing
Mm.
that actually, you know what, for example, for me, baking makes me really happy after all. Like what's the process, I guess? Is there a process?
Yeah. I'll be honest, it really depends person to person, but at the end of the day, it's figuring out what brings you joy. That's
Okay.
it. And just following what that is. Like, I can't say that this is the answer to that. So like, for example, you love baking, that's fantastic. I have ADHD. So what brings me joy can
Hmm.
vary from day to day, from week to
Yeah.
week. Like, I'd have an interest in plants for like 1 month. Right now, I'm figuring out how to paint, and that's been bringing me joy. Like I'd disconnect from everybody and just play video games for 1 month because that brings me joy. So it's really being able to identify that and then just be with that without any
Hmm.
feelings of guilt, without any feelings of shame. Because a lot of the time, what hinders our highest potential is really the guilt and fear of, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be doing something else. Or
Mm.
this isn't going to bring me income. Like, why am I wasting time on this? Or I should be doing something else to make money for my family, et cetera, et cetera. This is like a frivolous thing. And that's what hinders your highest potential, because you would tend to try to logically get in the way of your own happiness.
Yeah. And I think for many of us who think of highest potential, probably the first thing that comes to mind is like a pyramid or a mountain and you're on top of it. That's highest
Yeah.
potential. But for you as an emotional intelligence coach and you helping guide, people in organizations into their highest potential, how would you like people to imagine what a highest potential would look like? Not necessarily like a shape, but like maybe
Right.
a visual metaphor for it.
Right. So for me, highest potential at the end of the day would just be whatever image excites you. That's it.
That's
That's
simple.
all it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Because if you think of it like as a pyramid, oh, I have to do this, these are the steps to get
Yeah.
there, it
Mm-mm.
sounds impossible and it's not sustainable, because at least for me, the feeling is I'm always chasing something.
Yeah.
I
And it
don't want
looks
I don't want to
intimidating
keep
too, just thinking about it, right?
exactly, and like I don't want to keep chasing something. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense for me. I would prefer to just live in the moment, right? Being able to hyper focus on something that brings me joy, that I get excitement from. So at this certain moment, I am enjoying the baking. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, I'm gonna go to the radio station, I'm gonna host, I'm gonna enjoy this moment too. This brings me excitement. I get to talk to this person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be with in that moment, and so on and so forth. So instead of you, I guess, climbing. It's more of one foot in front of the other.
Wow. That's simple, monsters. Oh my gosh. There are so many things that we have overcomplicated in our lives.
That's true.
So many things. And so I really appreciate Kathi being here for helping us decipher what happiness means, what our highest potential should look like, or like how we want to picture it, or it's really that how we want to picture it like personally, and also the importance of emotional intelligence in everything that we do and with whomever we relate with. So before we go, Kathi, for the monsters who are listening, if they want to learn how to be happier in life, if they want to be guided to their highest potential, what programs or workshops do you offer from Coaching Happiness and Coach Well so that they can start building on their authentic lives?
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, on coachinghappiness.ph, I do offer one-on-one coaching. I'm also launching a program in June called Heart Workers, and that is really for learning emotional intelligence and how to self-coach yourself through the ups and downs of life.
Yes.
For Coachwell, you can find us at Evolve at Coachwell on Facebook and on Instagram. We currently are doing women's circles. For me personally, like the best people to really teach this to and the fastest learners are women, because we're already so tapped in terms of emotional intelligence. We just really need to really learn how to harness it. So there is a women's circle happening on the 25th. I think that is on a Monday at Kaz and Polly in BGC. It is, just a women's circle and a dinner gathering. So if you want to come, have a chat, talk about, whatever issues you feel you'd want to get off your chest, let your hair down, have a drink, come meet me. I'd love to get to know you guys. And we also have a mixer that's happening on the 27th, right before Holy Week starts, called Rose and Radiance. That's happening at I think in Poblacion. So you get to meet women leaders and just have a good chat, learn, network, learn how we can support each other to raise each other up. And yeah, it should be a good time for everybody. So thank you so much, Nikki, for allowing me to do this with you.
Of course. And it's such a pleasure once again to have you on the show, Kathi. Just to remind us, I think it's great timing also with it being Women's Month, with it being 2024, still at the first quarter of 2024, just to remind ourselves, where it is that we want to be in life and, just kind of work our way through towards that goal, but also kind of checking in with ourselves where we're at emotionally, relationally, and in terms of happiness also.
Yeah, like happiness has been, for the longest time, happiness has kind of been so underrated. People would say that no, purpose is more important than happiness, or the pursuit of success is more important than happiness. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, when you check in with yourself, do you know how to emotionally regulate? Like, how is your nervous system doing? That all goes back to happiness being the cornerstone, and knowing that at the end of the day, no matter how stressful life is, I have the tools that can get me back to a level of happiness where I have a regulated nervous system.
Well, there we go. Thank you very much, Kathi. And thank you to all the monsters who have kept it locked since 11 in the evening. And I'm pretty sure you guys have a lot of takeaways from this show, and that maybe you have written down a few things. I've actually written down a few things while we were talking too. So it's been such a pleasure. And once again, for the socials, if monsters are curious about, those programs and those consultations or coaching calls, where can they find you?
You can find me at coachinghappiness.ph on both Facebook and Instagram, or Evolve with Coach Well, again, on both Facebook and Instagram.
All right, there we go. Once again, Kathi Rañeses, happiness coach, but now also executive and emotional intelligence coach here on Heard on Thursdays. And once again, like I mentioned in the beginning, I would really love to have you back in person this time so that we can talk more. And I'm sure there's always
Yes.
more to talk about
Let's
with
make that
regards to
happen.
just life. Yes, we're going to make it happen for sure. Thank you very much once again, and keep it locked only here